Okay, let's jump in. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are really diving into something massive.
We are.
It's a journey into a single source that is, it's a theological roadmap, a political commentary, and a prophetic declaration all rolled into one, spanning nearly half a century of, well, really turbulent history.
It is, yeah.
We are plunging straight into the dramatic, intense, and ultimately hopeful messages revealed to the prophet Isaiah.
That's a perfect way to put it. I mean, Isaiah's work spanned the reigns of 4 different kings.
Yeah.
Judah, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah.
A huge stretch of time.
A huge stretch. And it was a time when the entire global chessboard was being very, violently reset by the rise of Assyria. So this isn't just a collection of sermons.
Right.
It's a really detailed blueprint of God's interaction with his people right in the middle of this catastrophic geopolitical shift.
And the scope of it is just breathtaking. It's not just about Judah and Jerusalem. It really pulls back to look at the nations all around them.
And you see this core theme, this undeniable cycle playing out again and again.
What is that cycle?
Well, the source keeps revealing God's ultimate ideal for Israel, and it always follows this pattern. First, purification, which comes through, necessary judgment.
Okay.
Then, after that, restoration to a renewed, unbreakable covenant. And then finally, the establishment of Jerusalem, or Zion, as he calls it, as the center of this worldwide kingdom.
A kingdom that actually reconciles hostile nations.
Exactly. And the entire thing hinges on one single requirement for the people. They have to function as God's loyal servants. That's their role.
And the message, it just starts with a complete shock. Isaiah doesn't ease you in at all.
No.
He opens in chapter 1 by staging this cosmic courtroom drama. The scene is both magnificent and, frankly, just devastating.
The grandeur is so intentional, God summons the personified heavens and the earth to act as witnesses.
Against his own people.
Against his own people. Just imagine that. The creation itself is called to testify against the corruption of its inhabitants. It's this devastating indictment of their thankless rebellion.
And what really stands out to me right from the jump is the analogy God uses to describe Israel's, their lack of spiritual intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
He opens with this emotional statement. I raised children, I brought them up, but they have rebelled against me. But then he compares them to farm animals.
Which has to be just utterly insulting.
It is.
And it's designed to sting. It creates this sad, stark contrast. God basically says, look, even the ox, the symbol of dumb, driven labor,
Yeah.
It recognizes the man who owns it, who feeds it.
It knows its master.
It knows its master.
Yeah.
The donkey recognizes the crib where its food is. They get who their supplier is. But Israel, they don't recognize their master. They just don't understand who cared for them.
So the Israelites, who were so proud of having the law, the temple, the covenant, they saw themselves as the wisest people on earth.
Most favored, yeah.
And in God's estimation, they are less discerning than the dullest farm animals. That is a radical inversion of how they saw themselves.
It's precisely the point. The ox and the donkey, in their simple recognition of dependence, they show a higher wisdom than the sophisticated, rebellious people of Judah. It sets the tone immediately. The problem isn't a lack of information.
No.
It's a profound failure to recognize their rightful king.
And that really sets the stage for our mission today. We need to unpack this whole prophecy, how this rebellion led to these inevitable, painful outcomes.
Right, the folly of trusting political alliances.
And then on the other side, the enduring promise of an ideal king who will bring this universal, eternal peace.
And as we go, you'll notice Isaiah constantly uses one specific divine title for God. The Holy One of Israel.
That's one of his favorites, isn't it?
It is. And it's more than just a nice theological label. It gets to the heart of the crisis. It pictures the Lord as the sovereign king who rules his covenant people and, crucially, exercises moral authority over them. So when they rebel, they're not just breaking rules.
They're rejecting their king.
They are rejecting the moral authority of their sovereign king. He is holy, and they are not.
So with that opening argument made in the divine courtroom, Isaiah then moves to the diagnosis. In chapter 1, the nation's condition is described not just as sinful, but as this deep physical and comprehensive sickness. It's a state of total national decay.
The language he uses here is so visceral. It's overwhelming. He describes them as offspring, weighed down by evil deeds, alienated from Yahweh because of this deep-seated, persistent rebellion.
They haven't just stumbled.
No, they've deliberately abandoned the Lord. They've rejected the Holy One of Israel.
And that metaphor of the unkempt wounds is it's terrifying. He describes the nation as a body that's been battered and abused, but then stubbornly refuses medical attention.
It's so specific and medically graphic. Isaiah says, "From the soles of your feet to your head, there is no spot that is unharmed.
Wow.
There are only fresh bruises, cuts, open wounds." And here's the crucial detail. These wounds have not been cleansed or bandaged or softened with olive oil.
So they're just festering.
They're festering, infected, and deliberately left untreated. The imagery shows that their sin isn't a one-time failure. It's a constant refusal to heal, or refusal to repent.
And if that internal spiritual sickness is festering wounds, then the physical result on the land is just utter devastation. The two are completely linked.
They are. The spiritual rot brings external ruin. The land is devastated. Foreign invaders have burned the cities. And this destruction leaves Jerusalem, what he calls Daughter Zion, completely isolated. It's such a powerful image of desolation.
Describe that isolation. It's not just a city under siege. It sounds deeply lonely.
He says she is left like a hut in a vineyard or a shelter in a cucumber field. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
When the harvest is over, that little hut is just abandoned, unprotected, exposed to everything. Jerusalem stands alone, battered by invaders, just this tiny, fragile shelter in a huge, ravaged field.
And that devastation sounds total. But right in that moment of desolation, there's the first glimpse of hope. Or at least the reason they weren't totally annihilated.
Right. And this introduces the concept of the remnant.
The key idea for Isaiah.
Absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
He emphasizes that if the Lord of Heaven's armies, a title suggesting just vast military power, had not left a few survivors, a remnant, they would have been instantly wiped out, like Sodom and Gomorrah.
So the remnant, these faithful few, they weren't saved because they were better than everyone else.
No, not at all. They were preserved by sheer divine mercy and constraint.
So the only thing stopping Judah from becoming another Sodom is God's decision to leave a small group. Their very existence is proof of God's grace, not their own righteousness.
Precisely. Saved by divine constraint, not human merit.
Yeah.
And so, having diagnosed the moral sickness and the physical damage, God then moves to their religious practices.
Right, the rejection of their elaborate ritual.
And he starts by calling the leaders of Sodom and the people of Gomorrah. I mean, that comparison alone must have been a crushing blow.
It's the ultimate indictment. He's saying their systemic injustice puts them morally on par with the most wicked civilizations they knew of.
And here's where it gets really interesting. God doesn't just reject their evil deeds. He rejects their good deeds, their worship.
The very things he told them to do.
The very rituals he commanded. Their sacrifices, their burnt offerings, their new moon festivals, Sabbaths, all of it, he declares, is meaningless.
Why?
He calls their incense detestable. He says, "I cannot tolerate sin-stained celebrations." He says, all their ritual activity is a burden that I am tired of carrying. I mean, think about that. The sheer volume of their empty religion had exhausted the patience of the Holy One.
So the problem wasn't the ritual itself. They were, following the schedule, making the sacrifices.
On the surface, yes.
But the sin, the spiritual sickness, had just contaminated everything. The outside performance didn't match the inside reality at all.
That's the critical insight. Their hearts were profoundly alienated. Formal worship had become this acceptable public substitute for obedience and a real justice-oriented relationship.
They were trying to buy God off with bull's blood while oppressing their neighbors.
Exactly. The Lord wanted a heart relationship characterized by righteousness, not just, religious theater.
To really drive this point home, Isaiah then pivots to one of the most famous metaphors in the whole book, the parable of the failed vineyard in chapter 5.
And this shows his genius as a communicator. He literally lures the listeners in with what sounds like a harmless, casual love song.
Just a poem about a friend in his vineyard.
Exactly. And then he suddenly yanks the rug out from under them, and it turns into this devastating condemnation. He builds up their anticipation for a happy ending, only to deliver a divine lawsuit.
And the detail he uses is incredible. It really emphasizes how much the divine owner committed to success. He did everything right.
He was the perfect vintner. The preparation was comprehensive. God, the owner, builds a hedge for protection. He removes all the stones from the soil. He plants the choicest vine. He even builds a watchtower and a winepress for the harvest.
So the implicit question is, what more could he possibly have done?
And the answer is nothing. But when the owner waited for the result, for good, edible grapes, what did the vineyard produce?
Sour, worthless fruit.
Exactly. And this is where the source material has this profound linguistic contrast. God waited for two things: justice, mishpat.
Okay, so righting social wrongs, fair courts.
Yes. And second, righteousness, tzedakah, right? Relationships between people, integrity.
But instead of mishpat and tzedakah, he gets these two twisted results.
Precisely. Instead of justice, they produced oppression, hispak, which is the constant inflicting of social wrongs on the vulnerable. And instead of righteousness, they produced violence, taka literally, the loud cries for help from the oppressed.
So the sound the owner hears isn't a happy society, it's the shriek of victims.
Disobedience and cries for help instead of fairness and peace. That four-way contrast just brings the condemnation into sharp focus. The failure is entirely with the grapes, not the vintner.
So what's the consequence?
Since the vineyard failed, the owner will remove the hedge, break the wall, and just abandon it to its enemies and the elements. He'll command the clouds not to rain on it. He'll let thorns and briars grow.
It becomes a total wasteland.
Total wasteland. The privilege is revoked.
And that sets the stage for the next section, where Isaiah catalogs the specific moral failures that poison the grapes. He lays them out in 6 distinct woes.
And these woes are like a mirror, reflecting exactly how Judah violated the spirit of their covenant relationship.
Let's start with the first one, greed and exploitation. This says a lot about the economy.
It was aggressive. The wealthy were accumulating field after field, buying out their neighbors until they were the only landowners left.
So they weren't just investing, this is predatory.
It was. They were violating the spirit of the Jubilee laws that protected the poor's ancestral land. They wanted to live alone in the land, completely isolating themselves from their own community in need.
And this ill-gotten wealth then fuels the second woe, self-indulgence.
These were the party animals of their society. They'd get up early just to start drinking and wouldn't stop until late at night, constantly intoxicated, always with music at their parties.
But the real issue isn't just the partying.
No. The profound issue is they were doing all this while paying no attention to the Lord's work. They completely failed to perceive his larger plans happening right in front of them. Their intoxication led to a total spiritual stupor.
So the heavy drinking was a symptom. They were using the revelry to drown out the voice of God and the cries of the oppressed.
Absolutely. And that self-indulgence breeds the next sin, open rebellion and taunting. They weren't just ignoring God, they were actively challenging the Holy One.
This is that chilling third woe where they actually dare God to act.
They literally challenged the prophet's warnings. They said, let him hurry, let him act quickly so we can see what happens.
Unbelievable.
They basically concluded that because judgment hadn't arrived yet, the warnings were just empty threats. It's the ultimate height of human pride baiting the sovereign king.
And the fourth woe. This might be the most insidious of all. The perversion of morality.
This is the death of intellectual and ethical integrity. They were calling evil good and good evil, turning darkness into light, bitter into sweet.
They hadn't just changed their behavior, they had changed their dictionary.
That's a great way to put it. They were using the same words, justice, righteousness, but defining them by their own corrupt standards. Moral standards were just destroyed.
Which leads to the fifth woe, intellectual arrogance.
Right. They thought they were wise, that they had some special understanding that superseded the old laws. They thought their clever geopolitical plans were better than God's simple counsel.
And the final sixth woe seems like the logical outcome of all this. Injustice and corruption.
It's the total collapse of the judicial system. Corrupt judges letting the guilty go free for a bribe while exploiting the poor. They even gloried in the macho man who was good at mixing strong drinks.
So they elevated intoxication over sobriety and justice.
The very drink they relied on wasn't a sign of strength. It was self-medication for despair, masking their spiritual childishness while they ignored God's law.
So part one is clear. They rejected God's will, so they're going to reap his rejection. The security they trusted is just a symptom of their sickness.
And having laid all that out, the prophecy transitions sharply to the inevitable judgment.
Right. It starts with this botanical image. Their root will rot, their flower will blow away like dust, but then it shifts to the external threat. God lifts a signal flag and whistles for a distant nation.
And this is a spectacular demonstration of Yahweh's sovereignty over world powers. He is calling a foreign power, Assyria, to execute the punishment.
Yeah.
And they are completely ready and prepared to do his bidding, even if they don't realize they're his instrument.
And the description of this approaching foe is just chilling. It's not an army. It's a terrifying, tireless machine.
It's supernatural efficiency. They're swift. They don't get tired or stumble. They don't even stop to sleep. Their arrows are sharp. Their bows are strung. Their horses' hooves are like flint.
They roar like lions.
and seize their prey, and absolutely no one can rescue it. God is raising them up like a massive club to humble his people and cure them of their pride.
And this brings back that irony of light and darkness.
The great reversal. In their sin, Judah's leaders turn moral light into moral darkness. So now, in judgment, the Lord will turn their life and prosperity into darkness and death.
This intense prelude leads us right to the moment that transformed Isaiah himself. The vision in chapter 6. The source material dates it precisely. In the year of King Uzziah's death, around 740 BC. Why is that timing so significant?
It's a moment of profound vulnerability. Uzziah had been a long-reigning, powerful king, maybe the best Judah had since Solomon, but his life ended in tragedy, struck with leprosy for his pride.
So his death left a political and spiritual vacuum.
A huge one. Assyria was rising, the threat was real, and the national glory seemed to die with him. Judah needed a strong, faithful king, and they didn't have one.
And in that moment of national mourning, Isaiah sees the true king.
The ultimate sovereign, the Lord enthroned, filling the temple. The vision is overwhelming. The Lord is on a high, elevated throne, and the hem of his robe fills the entire sanctuary.
And around him are the seraphs.
Celestial beings covering their faces and feet, acknowledging his infinite scorching holiness and crying out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of heaven's armies. His majestic splendor fills the entire earth."
That repetitive holy, holy, holy just underscores the absolute separation of God from the sin that Isaiah was diagnosing.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember that the Apostle John later wrote that the glory Isaiah saw was actually the pre-incarnate glory of Jesus Christ. This vision isn't just of a distant deity, but of the Son of God, the Messiah.
And Isaiah's reaction to this holiness is just terror.
He cries out, "Woe to me, I am destroyed, for my lips are contaminated by sin, and I live among people whose lips are contaminated by sin." He knows his own instrument of communication is unclean. He's unfit.
And then comes the cleansing.
Instantly. A seraph flies to him with a hot coal from the altar, the place of atonement, and touches his mouth with it, declaring his evil is removed and his sin forgiven.
So cleansing has to come before commission.
He has to be morally prepared before he can be sent.
Once cleansed, he volunteers, "Here I am, send me." But then comes the really paradoxical part of his assignment. God tells him his message will accomplish. What?
Not repentance, but the hardening of hearts. God tells him the people will hear but not understand, see but not perceive. It's an act of divine hardening. God is giving them over to the very stubbornness they chose.
Okay, wait. If the point of a prophet is to bring people back to God, why would God give him a message designed to make them more stubborn?
It's a point of profound theological tension. But we have to see it as a righteous judgment. They had chosen to be deaf and blind for so long that God confirms their choice. It's the natural consequence of their willful refusal to listen.
And ironically, this hardening actually speeds up the punishment.
It does. It expedites the Assyrian invasion, which reduces the nation to that battered remnant. It's the last desperate measure to get them to a point where they might eventually be ready for reconciliation.
So God uses their sin to bring about a necessary judgment, but they're still fully accountable for their rebellion.
It's a delicate balance. And it leads us right into the immediate crisis King Ahaz faced in chapter 7, the Syro-Ephraimitic threat.
This is where human fear just completely replaces divine trust.
With massive consequences. So Syria and Israel, Ephraim ally against Judah. They're trying to force King Ahaz to join their anti-Assyrian coalition. When he refuses, they decide to attack and install a puppet king who will.
That must have been terrifying for Judah. Two ancient enemies working together.
The source says the house of David was emotionally shaken, just as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. They were paralyzed by fear.
And God, through Isaiah, immediately gives assurance to the fearful Ahaz.
God tells him to stay calm, not to be afraid. He dismisses these powerful enemies, calling them two stubs of smoking logs.
It's pretty dismissive.
It is. He assures Ahaz their plan will fail, and further promises that Israel, the northern kingdom, will be destroyed as a nation within 65 years.
Now, we know the northern kingdom fell much sooner than that, in 722 BC.
Right, the immediate military threat dissolved quickly. But the 65-year timeline refers to the final erasure of Israel's identity through the importation of foreign settlers, a process that permanently dissolved their national identity. The full scope of the prophecy was fulfilled.
And the key, God says, is faith. He then commands Ahaz to ask for a miraculous sign to confirm his protection.
This is the pivotal test. God gives him an open invitation. Ask for a sign. Let it be as deep as Sheol or as high as the heavens.
But Ahaz refuses, using this cloak of false piety. I don't want to put the Lord to a test. What's his real motivation?
Pure hypocrisy. Ahaz had already thrown out God's plan. He had already decided to make a cynical alliance with Assyria. A sign from God was a threat to his geopolitical strategy.
So since Ahaz refused, the Lord gives the sign anyway, the Emmanuel sign.
Yes, despite Ahaz's unbelief. Look, a young woman will conceive and give birth to a son, and she will name him Emmanuel.
Which means God with us.
God with us.
Yeah.
The near-term prophecy was that before this child knew right from wrong, both Syria and Ephraim would be gone, and Assyria invaded, fulfilling that. But the ultimate promise of Emmanuel is the Lord raising up a faithful king from David's house who would trust him, a stark contrast to Ahaz's failure.
But this promise of salvation, it turns sour almost immediately. It becomes a message of judgment, the razor and the bees.
It's instantaneous. Because Ahaz refused to trust, the potential blessing becomes an inevitable curse. God says he'll whistle for the flies, Egypt, and the bees, Assyria. And the bees, Assyria, were the much more dangerous threat, intended to inflict serious pain.
In Assyria, the power Ahaz was trying to bribe for protection is named as God's instrument, a razor.
It's the ultimate irony. Ahaz had been negotiating to hire the king of Assyria to protect him. But Yahweh says, I will use Assyria, hired from beyond the Euphrates, as a razor. And that razor will shave off all the hair of Judah, the head, the body, even the beard.
Which is a mark of total dishonor. Shaving the beard was for prisoners or slaves.
Exactly. Complete national dishonor and degradation. The lesson is sharp. Whatever you trust in place of God will one day turn and devour you. His chosen ally became his razor.
And the land itself would be devastated.
Valuable farmland would revert to wilderness, overgrown with thorns. So few survivors would be left that the land would only be good for hunting and grazing a few animals. A total reversal of their prosperity.
But despite that crushing failure, the leaders who came after Ahaz learned nothing. They kept boasting about their clever schemes.
Which brings us to the cornerstone prophecy in chapter 28.
Yes.
This targets the cynical leaders who mocked Isaiah, boasting they had made a treaty with death, believing their human alliances made them immune to judgment.
They made a lie their refuge.
And God denounces that refuge. But then he pivots to provide the stunning contrast, his own true, permanent plan for security.
The cornerstone.
He says, look, I am laying a sure foundation stone in Zion, an approved, precious cornerstone. This foundation is utterly reliable, and the one who maintains faith, who relies on this cornerstone, will not panic.
But their false alliance is doomed.
Guaranteed. God promises to use justice as the measuring line. The treaty with death will be dissolved, and the judgment will sweep over them constantly, day and night.
The prophecy then shifts dramatically away from this immediate crisis and judgment toward a glorious future hope.
Yes, to the ideal king, the shoot from Jesse.
And this image of hope rises directly from the national stump left after the judgment.
It's the ultimate image of resurrection. After Israel is reduced to a barren stump, the source speaks of a shoot sprouting from Jesse's rootstock, Jesse, the humble father of King David. It's a future king appearing when all human hope is gone.
And this king's character is defined by divine enablement and infusion of the Spirit.
Yes, the Lord's Spirit will rest on him, giving him extraordinary wisdom, the ability to execute perfect plans, and absolute loyalty to the Lord. He won't be like Uzziah with his pride, or Ahaz with his fear.
And his rule will be righteous. He'll judge with perfect integrity.
He won't judge by mere appearance or hearsay. He treats the poor fairly, making the right decisions for the downtrodden, the very people Judah's leaders exploited. His authoritative word will strike the earth.
And the result of his coming is that famous picture of universal harmony, not just for people, but for all of creation.
It is profound. It's like a return to a pre-fall state. The wolf resides with the lamb, the leopard lies down with the goat, the lion eats straw like an ox, an infant can play safely over a snake's hole.
The very nature of conflict is removed.
Precisely. No one will injure or destroy anything because the earth will be completely covered with submission to the Lord's sovereignty, just as the waters completely cover the sea.
And the source emphasizes his deity through those incredible titles in chapter 9.
These show he's not just a better human king. He's divine. He's called Wonderful Advisor.
So no need for human counsel.
Exactly. Mighty God, Everlasting Father, meaning he reigns forever, and Prince of Peace. He's the source of that universal harmony.
And his dominion will increase forever. This isn't a hope, it's a certainty.
And that certainty is reinforced by history, by the account of God's vindication during the Assyrian crisis, but this time with Hezekiah, Ahaz's son.
The ultimate contrast. Hezekiah learned from his father's failure and chose to trust God against King Sennacherib.
It's the pivotal moment. Ahaz trusted man and was humiliated. Hezekiah, despite overwhelming odds, trusted God and got a miracle. Sennacherib mocked Judah's God, but Hezekiah just prayed for deliverance so the world would know Yahweh alone was God.
And God's response to Sennacherib's arrogance is fascinating. He basically exposes him.
He does. He speaks to him like a beast of burden. The Lord says, I know where you live and everything you do. He literally put a hook in his nose and a bit in his lips and led him back home, totally foiled.
And the climax of that is one of the most powerful divine acts in the whole book.
It is. In one night, the angel of the Lord kills 185,000 Assyrian troops. Sennacherib flees home in humiliation. And then God's expose continues.
He's assassinated.
By his own sons, in the temple of his god Nisroch, while he was worshiping. His own security system, human and divine, completely failed him.
So that historical defeat proved the power of faith and guaranteed the future prophecies. Then the prophecy shifts even further into the future, to the day of vengeance.
God is pictured as a divine warrior coming from Edom, wearing blood-red clothes, like someone who has stomped grapes in the winepress.
And he did it all by himself.
All by himself. This is the promised day of vengeance that has to come before redemption. He looked for support on earth, but there was none, so his own arm accomplished the deliverance alone.
It reinforces that only the Lord has the power to deliver.
And this brings us back to a consistent theme, the folly of idolatry. Chapters 44 and 46 have one of the most satirical takedowns of this.
The woodcarver. It's almost funny, but the condemnation is so serious.
It's a devastating deconstruction of man-made religion. A man takes a tree trunk. With half of it, he makes a fire, warms himself, bakes bread. He's nourished by it.
Okay.
And with the other half, the part that couldn't feed him or warm him, he makes a god, an idol, bows to it and prays, rescue me, for you are my God.
Which is logically absurd. He's the creator of the idol. He's superior to the thing he's worshiping.
The source is clear. The worshiper's mind is blind. They feed on ashes. How can the product of human effort care for its builder? It's just, you have to shake your head at that kind of spiritual blindness.
And the contrast between these idols and Yahweh is so potent, especially when you consider who carries whom.
This summarizes the entire difference. Look at the Babylonian gods, Bel and Nebo. Their massive idols are a heavy, burdensome weight carried into captivity on the backs of tired animals.
They're just cargo.
They're just cargo. In stark contrast, Yahweh says to Israel, I made you, and I will support you. I will carry you and rescue you. He supports his people from birth to old age. He is the ultimate burden carrier, whereas the idols are the burden.
This contrast, the weak nation and the powerful carrying God, sets up the climax of the servant songs. The contrast between Israel, the failed servant, and the Messiah, the ideal servant.
Right. Israel was commissioned as God's servant, but failed. They were deaf and blind. So God devises a new way through the ideal singular Israel, the servant Messiah.
And the servant's appearance in chapter 52, it mirrors the suffering Israel experienced.
It's shocking. He will be so disfigured, he no longer looked like a man. His form was so marred, he no longer looked human. He experiences the full measure of humiliation. The difference is, he undergoes it without resentment or rebellion. He suffers justly, but substitutionarily.
What is his mission?
It's dual. First, restore Jacob, or Israel, to God. Second, be a light to the nations, bringing deliverance everywhere, fulfilling the global mission Israel failed to accomplish.
And the outcome is this great paradox. Humiliation leads to exaltation.
His success will be so comprehensive that he'll be elevated and greatly exalted. This sudden rise will startle nations and shock kings as they witness something they'd never even heard about. It's the ultimate triumph of God's power.
To bring this all down to immediate relevance, Isaiah consistently returns to the necessity of true worship, especially in chapter 58.
He's targeting their hypocrisy. God rejects their false fasting, just bowing heads, wearing sackcloth. Why? Because that outward show was paired with arguments, brawls, and oppressing their workers.
So what is the acceptable fast? What does true worship look like in practice?
It's completely relational and practical. It involves removing sinful chains, setting the oppressed free, sharing food with the hungry, providing shelter for the homeless. It's an outward expression of a transformed heart.
And the promised reward for that genuine righteousness is incredible.
It is, God says. Then your light will shine like the sunrise. Then your restoration will quickly arrive, and God's splendor will be your rear guard. Their just behavior makes their connection to the Holy One visible to the world.
We've covered sin, judgment, crisis, and hope. Let's look at the final, unshakable certainty of these prophecies, the permanent promise and the new creation.
The prophet uses this dramatic, natural imagery. He says, all people are like grass, and all their glory and promises are like the flowers. They just dry up and wither.
So even the most powerful human kingdom is temporary. But compared to that, what is the decree of God?
The word of Yahweh remains forever. He makes the contrast even more dramatic. Even the sky will dissipate like smoke, and the earth will wear out like clothes, but the deliverance God gives is permanent. His decree is forever reliable.
And that certainty brings us to the ultimate culmination of hope, the great banquet and the new creation.
On Mount Zion, the Lord will host a great banquet, a lavish feast for all nations, with tender meat and the choicest wine. It's the rejoicing after global deliverance.
And at this banquet, the final enemy is destroyed.
God will swallow up death permanently and wipe away the tears from every face, removing all disgrace. It's the ultimate deliverance.
And the new earth, that description in chapter 65 is the climax of it all.
God says he's ready to create new heavens and a new earth where former things won't even be remembered. In this renovated universe, harmony returns. The wolf and lamb graze together. The lion eats straw. No injury, no destruction. The relationship is so restored that before they even call out, God will respond.
So we began this deep dive with the shock of Isaiah's revelation, the sin and failure of Judah, which necessitated the raiser of judgment. We tracked that through the kings, saw the folly of scheming, and landed on the certainty of the ideal king who brings global peace.
The core takeaways are just so critical. The folly of human pride and self-reliance, whether it's through cynical alliances like Ahaz's or empty religious rituals, and then the central reality of God's absolute sovereignty who orchestrates world events, raising up nations and destroying them, all leading to his promises fulfilled by the servant.
It's an incredible demonstration that history isn't random. It's an orchestrated drama.
And that brings us to the implication of that sovereignty. God's sovereignty and man's responsibility are always in perfect balance. God uses Assyria as a club, but Assyria is still held accountable for its own arrogance.
Our journey through Isaiah is a profound lesson in faith versus false security. Since predictive prophecy is given, according to the source, not so we can know the future to secure ourselves, but as confirmatory evidence that we can and should trust God. This leads us to our final provocative thought for you.
Consider the concept that faith, in this context, is fundamentally living without scheming. Since God often shatters our human protection plans, be they alliances, rituals, or clever lies, to lead us back to himself, what self-made protection plan, a financial scheme, a political alliance, a habitual cleverness are you currently relying on that God may be ready to shatter to lead you back to the sure foundation of the cornerstone?
That is something to contemplate deeply. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We hope this exploration of prophecy, politics, and the raiser of judgment has provided you with insight into the complexity and coherence of God's eternal plan revealed through Isaiah.